Oh, sure, that'd be great.
And when we get started.
Zoom, you got yours.
Hey, what's your all's Twitter?
Their Twitter is USAO Art Department DPT.
Okay, gotcha. Cool.
And their Instagram's the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not quite 30 yet. Wait. I will ask if you will put your phones on silent at the very least. Come on in, what's that? We will be streaming live on the USAO channel, so, be cordial. And they will be, asking for questions. If you have questions, you're certainly welcome to ask that. Those.
Do what? I did take a picture because he came right up to me immediately.
Like Angus.
Right?
Let's say the Spotify rap. I know.
Oh, no, because no.
What are you talking about?
So, well, no, because like it's nothing worth looking at, honestly, because like
Well,
I got caught up in like a bunch of soundtracks, and I re-entered. You know when what's the new Karate Kid show on Netflix? Cobra Kai.
Right.
So I started getting into all the Karate Kid movies, and like so I pulled up all the Karate Kid soundtracks, and of course Peter Cetera was. And
That's the only name I recognize, by the way.
You don't recognize Godzilla?
I'm old.
Godzilla's older than you. And Shadow and Bone is an amazing soundtrack. I mean, it's a great Netflix series, but yeah, soundtrack.
I'll look it up.
And I found all kinds of obscure.
Should I stand awkwardly next to you or sit here?
No, you should stand.
Oh.
No, yeah, totally stand. And then this one, I'm totally confused because I don't remember. I remember looking up REM, but I don't remember any of the other names. So I don't know where they come up with these.
I think the data cutoff is like October, so they take data from January to October.
Weird. So weird.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Ready? About ready?
Stop. I'm stoked.
Good to go? Okay. Welcome. I'm Jacqueline Knapp, art professor here at USAO, and I would like to welcome you to master class. That's going to be talked to, discussed, I don't know what to call it exactly, by resident artist Jerry Bennett and Literati Press publisher Charles Martin. I hope I got that right.
Yeah, close enough.
So welcome, and I also welcome those that are streaming at home on YouTube. Questions will be allowed, so if you're on YouTube, you can type your questions into the chat. Otherwise, gentlemen, take it on.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It has been a crazy semester. Well, it's been a crazy few years, honestly, with everything that's been going on. And I apologize for screwing up the initial scheduling of this master class, which was supposed to have been a few weeks ago, and then I had COVID. That's as easy as it gets, as crappy as it gets. But we're here to talk to you about more cooler things than that. And so I thank you for all those who are here in person and all those who are in here virtually. Again, my name is Jerry Bennett. I am a graduate of USAO, a 1993 graduate. I am the artist in resident here right now, so I'm teaching some classes and drawing some pictures. And just a few years ago, I say a few years ago, 2020, I was inducted into the Hall of Fame here, and so it's been a roller coaster ride. And I'm just thank you. I wasn't looking for that, but thank you so much anyway. It's been a huge honor and a huge privilege to be a part of everything that's happening at USAO. And it's because of USAO that I got to do that I'm getting to do a lot of things now, because honestly, my time here really souped up my confidence levels, and everything that I have participated in here, whether it was the Encore Jazz Ensemble that I was a part of, whether it was me being the mascot here, being a homecoming king, and I was a cheerleader as well. so I was very involved in USAO. USAO is very, very dear to me, and it changed my life. It changed my worldview. It changed my perspective. It changed me in so many levels. And so I think that's where all my confidence in deciding to actually pursue a career in art began, really cemented. I always wanted to be like a Disney animator, a Disney director. I wanted to be a storyteller ultimately, and it was my time here that where I was really super studying into the whole idea of going into Disney animation. But at the very end, I realized I can have so much more control, so much more power as a graphic novelist. You know, as a graphic novelist, I am the storyteller, I am the producer, I'm the director, I'm the art director, I am the concept artist, I'm the storyboard artist, I am all of it. So maybe it's a power trip to be a graphic novelist, I don't know. But regardless, I immediately started focusing on that, and truth be told, I was going to do it in California. I mean, in the 90s, Image Comics was a huge booming industry, because all the comic artists and the big names in comic art at Marvel and DC all jumped ship and started their own company, Image Comics, and they were in San Diego, and I thought, that's where I need to be. So I made plans. I had another friend that was going to school here whose parents live in San Diego. I had arranged to be in a room in one of their to rent out one of their bedrooms, and it was a week before I was heading out, and that week they had informed me that they had to give that room back to one of their other kids. And so I just moved to Oklahoma City, got a regular job, and I still pursued my art. I still continued doing it, and in that total frame time of 15 years working a regular job, I was pushing hard, trying to find all kinds of clients, doing anything honestly at the time, because I just wanted to do art, period. And so I took any kind of clients. I did t-shirt design, I did murals, I painted hallways, I did all the faux things that you can do in homes. I did portraits of all kinds, wedding portraits, baby portraits, pet portraits, you name it. And I was doing comics. There was no comic scene in Oklahoma in the late 90s. But that didn't deter me, because I wanted to do comics. I started reaching out and I slowly started finding people who were also interested in comics. And when Facebook came on the scene, we started a Facebook page for Oklahoma comic creators, and we started slowly attracting a group of people who were all like-minded, wanting to write and draw and create and produce comics. And it's amazing, and it's grown to a point now where we've got people who are in the industry beyond Oklahoma. Sterling Gates is one of those names. He was recently one of the big show writers for CW's The Flash. He was a writer for 4 years for Supergirl at DC Comics, and still a comic creator to this day doing things. And so there's big names and all other names on there, and so now I'm at a point in the I don't even know what year it was, but it was the year I was getting ready to turn 40, and it must have been 2010, I think. And I decided I did not want to be working that one crazy regular job when I turned 40. So I just made a huge leap of faith and went for it, went after it, and 10 years later, I am now doing art of all kinds. I get to do artwork like this particular piece right back here. I did for just recently for the Oklahoma Contemporary Gallery. They have a video game inspired show going on right now called Open Worlds. Amazing show. and they wanted a companion piece for their resale shop, so they reached out to me for that. I get to do work for the Gazette, for Oklahoma Today, lots of fun illustrations, and I get to do comics. And I am currently doing a comic co-creator title called Glamorella's Daughter, and this is the time now that I want to introduce you to my good friend, Charles J. Martin, who is the publisher of Literati Press, I can't believe I just said it, that was your fault. Literati Press comics and novels. I want him to tell a little bit about his journey, but he is also the writer of Glamorella's Daughter too. So Charles, please speak a little bit about yourself.
So, just for those who are curious, and I'm sure that you are, that is exactly how he talks when we're in a car together. And whenever we're in a hotel room at a convention, just randomly through the night, he's like. So, this is Jerry all the time, and it's really delightful.
No apologies.
So I went to Oklahoma Baptist University as a creative writing and journalism major. I did not make their Hall of Fame due to the fact that they almost expelled me my senior year. They did graduate me despite parking tickets, but they were just ready to be rid of me. So ever since I've written for newspapers, magazines, books, comics, movies, just a journeyman, as you kind of have to be whenever you're in the middle of the country, just taking whatever jobs come through. But by writing just about everything I could find, I developed a really diverse skill set. And my core writing, which is comics and fiction, got much stronger because of it. So if any of you are writers and you're wanting to get into comics, I would definitely suggest that you consider writing everything else, and especially if you're not good at it. It doesn't need to be good, but there are aspects of your writing that will improve as you challenge yourself to take on a medium that you're not comfortable with. And nobody has to read it but you. So, Literati Press started after my first novel was published. It was published from a small publishing company that had just started up, and they were just kind of curious to see what it would be like to be a publisher. And they liked my story, we put it out, hijinks ensued. A lot of the books were thrown away accidentally in a dumpster. Somebody actually dove in the dumpster and pulled them out and emailed me and told me they liked my book. Now a lot of them were still in the dumpster. And over the time, I realized a lot of the things that I had this publisher doing, it was better if I did them myself. Not anything against them, but I understood my story. I understood what it was about. A lot of the messaging I was putting out myself anyways. And there was a lot of other voices within Oklahoma that were trying to tell the same kind of stories that I was, and they didn't have a platform. Now, I did not have a lot of money. I was actually very poor at the time, and was waiting tables, freelancing, doing whatever I could just to afford another box of books, to afford a convention table, and just to keep the machine running. We were making comics off of repurposed office supplies. It was lean times, but we actually got a lot of traction. We didn't know anything about what we were doing, but we were just producing and learning and failing and succeeding every once in a while, finding our fans. And over time, we had developed enough enthusiasm and support within the community that we started having really fantastic artists and writers start approaching us for their titles. And I was still waiting tables at the time, like barely scraping by, but they knew I at least had a vision. And we ended up, of the many titles that we took on during that time, we took on Natasha Altarici's Heathen, which is probably still to this day the best comic to ever release in Oklahoma. It won a tremendous amount of awards, got optioned for a movie, was a critical darling. It pushed us to the brink just because the demand was so much higher than we anticipated. It was a feminist Viking tale about a woman trying to take down Odin to create a more just world, and that really resonated at the time, and as it continues to resonate. So we eventually had to move that title to a larger publishing company because I was by myself having to mail out 40 to 50 comics a single day, and I couldn't keep up. But after that happened, I started having conversations with a lot of the people within Oklahoma that were really trying to create something. Jerry, one of them. And I asked, okay, we know we can succeed. So if we get another one of these kind of comics to take off on us, what then? How do we keep it? How do we not get in the way of its momentum? How do we give it the best platform it can and ride it all the way into, fame and fortune? So we started discussing then what the next version of Literati Press was going to look like. It was not a house of one where I decided what we published and what we didn't. It became a council of everybody had the same shared voice, that even though this, I was the founder, I was now just one of 9. And that was the best decision I ever made. And since then, we have an infrastructure that is able to support any comic, no matter how big it gets. There's still not an unlimited amount of money. There's a lot of publishers that come in with $1 million war chests and hey to us. But we have the talent now that we didn't have before. So for all of you, if you are going back to a small community or you're going into a city where there's not an established comic book culture, you can make something really amazing happen because there is talent there. It doesn't matter where you are in the country, talent is a continuous thing, like it is even. Now, whenever you get out of college, you may go out to a major city and you do have brain drain, but I guarantee you there is a 12-year-old who has amazing chops as a storyteller or as an artist who just needs a mentor, just needs a platform. Those people exist everywhere. So wherever you find yourself after you get out of college, I promise you, if I could make it something like this happen, you can too. It just takes a lot of guts and takes a lot of effort. But there has never been a time in the comic book industry or media industry where opportunity has been easier to get. Now there's a lot of noise, it's hard to break through that noise, but if your product is good, if your heart is there, you're doing it for the right reasons, there is a path. We are in our biggest wave of comics that we've ever done. There are 3 titles. We have Glamorella's Daughter, which Jerry drew, and it was originally his concept. He brought me in to help with the script and to flesh out the idea. We Promised Utopia, and that is a sci-fi saga. That is the biggest comic we've ever done. There are 7 people working on that comic, which is exactly as chaotic as it sounds. But it breaks the story up into 3 different eras, and how a utopia that is created from a marriage of technology and the economy, and then how that utopia falls. So if you like that big image, sweeping stories, that's what that one is. Then Blackjack Demon, which is a one-man show and so much easier to manage, and it's from an oil painter from Santa Fe who decided to return to his first love of comics. He made the money that he wanted to make out of art, and he decided that he wanted to do something just for him. So he came up with this fantastic Western. And we actually met him, for those of you who are able to make the drive to Oklahoma City, we met him at this weekly ink and draw that we do inside our bookshop. It's free, it's open to the public. Every week we have somebody from LP, either a writer, an artist, teacher, that is on hand just to advise. It's from 3 to 5 every Sunday. And Nick just started coming in, and he just said, I got this idea, I think it's pretty good, and I need help kind of figuring out what to do with it. And he started pulling out pages that he'd hand-drawn, and we're like, man, put some ink on this, we can publish it tomorrow. He's like, no, these are just thumbnails. And yeah, it was amazing. We were just like, yes, come into our lair. We're definitely interested in making a lot of money off of this. So Blackjack Demon is about a kid's father who gets murdered by a creature who crawls out from the earth, and the kid chases him out into the Old West to find him and kill him. And it was our first one on the new release, and it was kind of a magical moment because we had gotten the orders in right before a meeting that we had.
And you have to understand that we were attempting something new in trying to distribute on a national level. Instead of what we had done in the past, going from convention to convention, trying to sell our comics, we decided to use the mainstream method of distribution through Diamond Distributors, which formerly had been the big distributor with Marvel and DC comics. And so,
Yeah, so in one day, we found out in one day we had sold more comics than we had in any other year aside from that 1 year of Heathen.
yeah.
Just in one day. And it was just, yeah, there was a lot of jumping and screaming and hugging, and it was like, oh my God, this is gonna work. And it's, continues to be very challenging. But this idea that we had, that started 10 years ago by stealing from the places that we worked, is actually a professional organization. We are putting out product that's on par with any publisher out there, and I will say that to anyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's me.
So we want to talk. We love talking about the process of creating comics, and that was not the main emphasis that we were intending to do tonight. But we're totally open to answering any questions about the comics process because we just love it so much. To be honest, and but we do want to talk about like the reality, and he gave you kind of a quick synopsis of the reality of putting comics out there, but he just scratched the surface as far as trying to, break into the market, enter the market, trying to, put yourself out there, because there are so many moving parts as a comic creator specifically, or even as an artist. If your goal is to, to make money with your art, there's a lot of things you have to consider. And some of you may have already considering those things, but I do want to, take a few moments to talk about those things, because unfortunately, we are, as artists, especially those kind of artists who want to work for ourselves, and that doesn't speak for everybody, but it does speak for a large contingency, just from the questions that I've asked many of you about what you want to do with your degree once you're out of here, and so I will say that if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand, and if you're on YouTube watching, feel free to enter in the chat questions, and they'll ask us those, and so we are more than willing to answer any kind of questions that you might have. We might have good answers, we might have sucky answers, but we'll do the best we can.
Just to catch me up, Jerry probably already knows all this, but just show of hands. I'm assuming everybody in here is interested in making a comic, but who has either already made a comic or is currently working on one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-ish, 7-ish. And who is wanting to be just an illustrator? Like a work-for-hire illustrator, not creating your own stories. Awesome. Who's wanting to write their own stories? Okay. All right. Cool. Awesome. Okay. Go ahead.
So yeah. So let's go. I'm going to take us to the point where we have already created a comic. Like I said, if you have questions about the process, feel free to raise your hand. We'll talk about that. But I'd like to talk about the point of having a product ready to sell, ready to produce, and there's a lot of ways to do that. We have chosen, because we are so supportive of Oklahoma creators and Oklahoma businesses and Oklahoma entrepreneurs, that we have really pushed, and Charles can probably speak way more about that than I could, but we have pushed hard to really support Oklahoma as a whole, because the wealth of talent and the bad name that Oklahoma has had because of lots of crazy things, has really empowered us and impassioned us to really want to make that change of the kind of reputation that Oklahoma has into one that is full of talented people, full of creative people, full of amazing personalities, full of amazing businesses. And so, and so we're coming at this from that standpoint, and I'll explain that a little bit. So you have a product, and you haven't even printed it yet. Maybe you have a PDF ready to print of your comic, from maybe either it's a 5-page comic you want to start out with, or maybe it's a full story, a full 22-page comic book story, or maybe you have been just working your butt off and you have put out a graphic novel, whether it's like a 90-pager, a 200-pager, or an Alan Moore 500-page tome. I don't know, but maybe you've got this amazing creation that you're ready to put out in the world. I'm going to tell you, every step that we talk about tonight is going to involve sacrifice. It's going to be a sacrifice of your time. It's going to be a sacrifice of your money. It's going to be a sacrifice of resources of many, many kinds. And so, before Literati, and I might ask you to speak a little bit about this, before Literati went to the route that we are currently in now, we have a number of local printers that we really love, and I don't even know if they knew about. I don't even know at what point they started making comics. There's one particular one that we've had a long relationship with called DigiPrint, and they are a small printer in Oklahoma City, and they've been printing my art prints that I sell at Comic Cons, and they've been printing comic books, they've been printing coloring books. They just print a number of lots of things, and I don't know how long they've been doing comic books, but you might be able to speak into that.
I remember being at conventions, going all the way back to when I remember starting conventions.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Okay.
Well, 20 years. I actually talked to Kevin the other day, and he said 20 years.
Oh goodness, yeah. So there you go. This has been a long road for us, and so there's been a lot of heartache, but there's been a lot of joys in it too. And so, say you have, I'm gonna go come to it with the 22-page, and with cover, back cover, inside stuff. There's 24 to 26 pages, and you have to think about the logistics because printers print off books of any kind in increments of 4, and so you even right off the bat you have to think logistically in how you're going to print your book. If you've got a 22-page book, say you have a 25-page book, you automatically need to find 3 more pages in order. You have to find filler to add 3 more pages to make a 28-page book printable, ready to go. And so once you have that ready to go, you have to count the cost. And now, thanks to COVID, paper prices are insanely high right now. The price of wood, paper, all of that's just really.
The shipping is the issue.
Is the shipping the issue? Okay, the shipping's the issue then. So
Well, there's more issues. That's not what this is about.
Right, yeah, no, yeah.
I can talk about that all day. That's my day job.
Yeah, you could talk about that. So, there's just, and like the average price right now of printing one comic book, I think is like well, it might have even gone up, but the last time we had printed comics with them,
it was about $3 when we went through DigiPrint.
Okay.
And the problem with that is the distributor takes off 60%, so you're already at a loss. Now, those comics there were.
And when you say take off 60%
from the list price.
from the list price.
Yeah, which would be about $2.
So you're having to sell to Diamond for
Yeah.
$2 a copy.
But fortunately, we printed those through offset, which is cheaper. And so just as a thing, so you were talking about the multiple of 4, and I promise you that is a very boring thing to talk about, but it's very important. But here's the thing that might help. So everybody knows what a page is. This right here is a page. This right here is a page. These two together is a spread. So a spread is 2 pages on one side. Now, 2 sides, both printed, would be called a sheet. That means it's one sheet of paper that prints those 2 sides. And of course, it changes the order so it folds correctly. But whenever you're laying out, whenever you're thinking about your page number, that's the reason it has to be a multiple of 4, because it is two pages per spread, 2 spreads per sheet.
Okay. So there's already investment of money in the production, and you want to have a decent number of comics. If you're starting on your, and I'm taking this perspective of starting on your own, not publishing through, you're self-publishing. That's the term. That's basically the basic term. If you can, obviously you can submit your story to be published with a company, a publishing company, and that has grown to be a bigger opportunity than it used to be. Right now, we're living in a wonderful time of independent stories and independent creators. But like Charles had said earlier, there is a lot of noise, being that means there are a ton of stories, that's a ton of original stories that are out there even already now that have been published. And when you think about that number compared to the number of stories that have yet to be published, that number is like probably 10 times larger. And so, I mean, so you are already entering a huge world of competition. And I tell people every time, though, that there is an audience for your work. There's so many we're in an age now. Comic art styles are like across the board. As are the stories. Absolutely, yes. Not to say, and this is part of the process side. You know, you still have to tell a story in a way that you're leading an audience and stuff. You know, so that's, I mean, the process. You have to tell a good story. Your comic book has to be, you know, well crafted in order to have better chances of being published, or better chances of selling it as a self-published creator.
And to be more specific, you have to tell a good story that people who are around to actually buy your comic will read. So if you're trying to be a professional comic book artist or writer or anything, any kind of creative craft, if you want to be a professional, if you were to make money doing it, you have to think about your audience. So you're writing to your audience, you're not writing to yourself. If you want to write to yourself, that is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But that is a consideration you need to start thinking, especially whenever you start promoting to a publishing company, because that is what they want to know. Who is going to read this story? Who is going to pay for this story? And are there enough of those people to justify us putting an enormous amount of expense into this book to print? And if they add those things up and they're like, yes, there are enough potential customers for this book, let's go ahead and do it. There are like small publishing companies that are like, we don't care if it's a weird story, we're just going to go ahead and do it. But those are also publishing companies that aren't able to pay advances, and chances are you're never going to see a royalty check. It's just art for art's sake, and there's nothing wrong with that. But once you start getting into the craft side of it, where you're wanting to be a professional, like you have to start thinking about what your market is. And I know that's not fun, and I know that that's not the kind of thing I want to consider either, but it is a hard lesson that every artist needs to learn.
Well, and I would argue that maybe you are wanting to write for a certain audience, and so, I mean, that could be exciting, because if you create something that audience falls in love with, then, I mean, there's such an amazing feeling that happens, you know, when your stuff is noticed and your stuff is being read by people, and you start seeing reviews online, and you start seeing people talk about your stuff, and you see TikToks about your book, and yeah, I mean, yeah, those things can be super exciting.
Yeah, and it also ends up making for a better story anyways, because you are telling to an audience, and whenever you're thinking about the audience, you're like, what kind of language do I use with this audience? Like, am I telling it to them over a campfire, or is it the kind of thing that, like, you know, we're at a coffee shop or whatever? You start thinking about the way that conversation between you and the audience goes, and then some more color and some more vibrancy comes from it, rather than, and I'm an editor as well, and this is something that you have to beat into writers over and over again. The story itself is not enough. The characters itself are not enough. The narration has to be an important part of your story, because that is one of the pillars. You know, the story, conflict, characters, and narration are the things that hold up the entire mechanism. So that's another reason to write all kinds of stuff, because you'll learn all those lessons with every different medium you try and tackle.
Yeah.
Anywho.
No, perfect. What point?
Oh, well, then let me talk about, okay, so he's talking about, you have a finished PDF,
Okay.
and I'm gonna go ahead and say this before we get too much further. If what you're working on right now, or you're about to start working on, is a 200-page graphic novel, stop, and don't do that. Not for your first thing, because the thing is, you're gonna get 40 pages in, and you're gonna look at page 1, and you're like, wow, that's terrible.
Well, and I will say, if you do jump into that kind of thing, don't expect it to be perfect, first draft.
Yeah. So what we try and encourage everybody to do that's getting into this, and really, it doesn't matter what kind of craft you're doing. If you pick up a guitar and you're like, okay, cool, I'm gonna write an opus after my second lesson, that's not gonna go out well. Writing and art are exactly the same way. You need to produce, you need to produce, you need to produce, you need to develop muscle memory, you need to gain knowledge, you need to read, you need to go to galleries and look, and you need to steal. You need to steal a lot of ideas from a lot of different people, and then you mix them all up and you think of the things that work for you, because these are people who have already solved problems you haven't gotten to yet. So if you follow their tread all the way up to where they stopped, then there's this whole horizon they didn't even get to that now you can. So that's how we've gotten to where we are as a society, that we're telling these fantastic stories, is because we walked along the trail of all these people who have gone before us. They stole from all the people behind them. We're stealing from them, and somebody's going to come along and steal from us. That's the way it's supposed to go.
And you may not even like the term stealing, but look at it like this: you're absorbing the good things that you see in the work that you're reading, and you, whether you realize that you're taking that stuff in, you are, and you start to some of it's like purposefully implemented. Some of it naturally gets in there as you continue to practice your craft. As soon as you you have to keep practicing. That whole 10,000-hour rule, that is no joke. You have the success will come if you put the work into it. That sounds like an odd statement to make. It sounds like the percentage is too unreal, but
it's not, because once you've done something that long, you reach that threshold where inspiration is not that important anymore. It's still important, but it's not that important. You can sit down and you can write yourself to inspiration rather than having to wait for inspiration to come to you. And that is any professional. Any professional who's been doing this a long time, they will quietly, politely roll their eyes anytime that somebody says, well, I'm just not inspired. It's like, no, go do the work. You'll find it. You'll find your way.
Yeah,
And that's what those 10,000 hours get you.
Yeah, and those are the kind of solutions that come with artist block and those those kinds of issues. You get inspired, and that's where you start solving problems, and that's where those walls do come down, and you start wanting to jump into it and really delve into it, and things get exciting, and then you start creating, things start happening. Absolutely.
Yeah. So in the point that you are now, unless you've already been doing comics for a long time, you are in general creativity mode, and this is where you're supposed to be. And this is a fantastic place to be, and it's something that is challenging for Jerry and I, because we have so many things going to do. It's something that we have to really work hard to do anymore. And what that is I'm waking up and I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to create something today, and it doesn't have to be good. I'm just going to do it. And so if you're thinking about doing a comic, what I want you to do, what I would love to see you do, is to come up with a 6-page story and finish it as quick as you can. And it doesn't matter if it's good. In fact, it's not going to be good. And if it comes out flawless, that means you didn't try hard enough. So it should be something when you look at it, you're done with it, and you're like, the last line is done, and you're like, okay, well, nobody's ever seen this. But you've learned a lot of lessons along the way. You do that, just do it consistently. It could be a 3-page comic. Get yourself a Webtoons account and just start throwing junk on it. And what you're going to see is your trajectory is going to go faster and faster and faster, just because you're developing all those muscle memories, you're solving a lot of issues, you're getting more engaged in the comic book community, you're finding the things that really light you up, and then, God, maybe even a year from now, then you're like, okay, now's the time for the 200-page graphic novel.
on that same token, where you're saying, get a webtoons and start throwing stuff on there now, like this is the time to start building your audience.
Yeah.
No matter what level that you feel like you're at, there is an audience that's ready to start building. And so social media, this is all, and honestly, this is a business tactic at this point, because any publisher nowadays will look at your social media and gauge how much they want to invest in you by the number of followers that you have, and the way you post, and in your presentation, how you present yourself. And so, whether it's through webtoons, whether it's through Instagram, whether it's through digital portfolios, whether it's through whatever. So
What are the new kids doing these days?
Whatever new social media, almost everything's almost video now, and so I don't even know how to address that as a static comic artist. Although I'm starting to see really neat things that are happening with mostly Instagram stories, because I have not touched TikTok, to be honest. But I will say that these are the things that you do want to jump into and start like putting your process pics. I see several of you have been putting process pics on your social media, and those are the things that your audience wants to see. They want to see that process because they want to know how these things are done. They want to see how these things are created, and they want to know that you're as human as they are. They want to see that you are like struggling, or you're having challenges, and so you talk to them about that, and this is part of from this point on, if you're wanting to put out a comic book, consider yourself a business person. Consider yourself a business owner, an owner of your creator-owned property, and think about how to operate a business. Think about how to advertise as a business in the cheapest ways possible. And right now, the cheapest ways possible is as a social media presence.
Yeah. So going back to Natasha and Heathen. So Heathen is a fantastic comic. It's a wonderful story. It's great art.
Yes.
But that is not why it initially caught fire. It initially caught fire because she had already been ground gaming on Twitter, developing a following there, engaging in artists that were much bigger than she was, writers that were much bigger than she was, advocating for the art that she wanted to see, the stories that she wanted to read, and developing a trust with her followers that whenever it's like, okay, so here's some images from this story that I'm working on right now, that she was legit. She was vetted by that point, and people were excited to see it. So it feels like a grind, social media does. Sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes. Definitely when you're getting started. But whenever your magnificent creation is ready to be, unleashed on the world, you have your platform. Just think about it as you're an independent band, little rock band or whatever, that's just been gigging around town. This is what you're doing. It's the same exact thing. You're playing a gig in front of 2 people, then you're playing a gig in front of 4 people, then you're playing a gig in front of 5 people. And over time, you're developing this audience, and you're starting to self-publish these little whatever, they're doing cassette tapes again, which is fun.
Yeah.
But you're whatever you can leave, and you're like, hey, I need gas money. Can you please? Speaking of which, we need gas money, and Elizabeth for sale. I need gas money, so please buy my thing. Here's this T-shirt that I bought for $1, and then took a Sharpie and put our name, band name. That's what you're doing on social media, going to conventions and stuff like that. That is a little more down the line, but it's no different. So you have the ability to write an amazing story, but you have the obligation to that story to become a good advocate for it. So that's what social media is. And that is what in-person appearances, and they are hard. Whenever you go to a comic book shop or a bookstore and you're there alone, you've got a little folding card table, nobody's paying attention to you, you just want to make at least one sale so it's not a complete disaster. Those things still matter, and they will add up over time. They will get you the momentum. And sometimes it doesn't feel like it. It definitely, and many times it doesn't feel like it to me, but.
Yeah, there was a time where we had made a trip to Austin this past year, and we were doing a small tour of doing some signings for Glamorella's daughter.
Oh my God, that was a horrible signing.
He knows which one I'm going to talk about.
Oh my God, that was embarrassing.
Yeah, we went to there were some really great comic shops that were like super supportive, and they went above and beyond, and we sold really well there. And there was one particular one that when we arrived there, they had completely forgotten that we were coming, and so they were like semi-scrambling to put a table out for us.
They were so mad at us just for showing up.
Yeah, the employees were like a little put out that we were there, like we were in their way, and we were kind of a burden on them, and it was fun in that respect. But the sad truth though is that they sell a lot of our comics, and they end up like buying a ton of our comics as we were leaving. And so, you know, regardless of what they do to you personally, I mean, like how you feel about the way they react and respond to you personally, you know, as a business, you have to respond professionally, and knowing that this kind of organization, a comic book shop of this size, and it was a pretty sizable one.
Yeah, it's really good.
They can you know, turn the tables on you in your sales, you know, and who you are as a presence, because they have social media presence too, and you know, if they decide they don't like you, you know, they'll let their audience know.
Yeah, they can either, so that's the kind of store that will sell a lot of your stuff when you're not there, and those are the best kind of stores because there's no effort from you. A little
That's
bit
true.
of effort just to reach out to them.
That's true.
Conventions are no different. Conventions, you'll learn this if you ever start doing conventions. You'll learn that Friday is okay. Saturday should be gangbusters because there's so many people there. That's the biggest day. But for indie creators, Sunday's actually the best day. And the reason is everybody's gone through the convention. They've seen everything. And they're like, man, I got $20 left in my pocket. I'm going to go to those weirdos over there. I'm going to buy some comics. And we end up, you know, especially when we were starting off, we sold more in the last 2 hours of Sunday than we sold the other two combined. Just because everybody was like, they're memorable. I like who they are. I don't know if I'm going to like their stuff or not, but I believe in them. And unfortunately, no matter how good your book is, no matter how good your comic, a lot of times people are buying you, they're not buying the comic. And then if the comic delivers, then they're like, okay, everything they do I'm going to buy. And luckily we've gotten to that point where we show up at a convention and if somebody hasn't seen us in a little while, they're like, one of everything. Yeah. And that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a few minutes left.
Really?
Yeah, we're closing. Yeah. So before we continue with any thoughts, do you guys have any questions at this point right now?
Let me go ahead and say real quick, I know we're kind of had done some like, oh, this is hard, this is hard, this is hard. Once you actually finish the comic, promotion is the only thing that's really hard. Printing the comic is easy, and if you have specific questions on that, reach out. It really is not that hard. It's not
If you have lots of money, it's easy, sure.
I mean, you're not, it's not that bad, like, but like, you think about it, this thing that you've spent, whatever, hundreds of hours on, you could buy a copy of it to resell for, you know, $2.
Yeah.
That's not too bad. Like, I had a family of 4, we were subsisting on less than $30,000 a year, but I was still running a publishing company.
Yeah.
So like,
true.
it's pretty doable. It's pretty doable. Definitely more so than other things. But if you get to that point where you finish a comic and you believe in it, definitely don't let anything stand in your way.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, if the passion's there, then you'll make it work. You'll figure out a way to make it work. And there's lots of avenues that we haven't even been able to talk about. Yeah, there's so many avenues that we haven't talked about that if you want to make it work and you are in love with this enough, that the passion's there, the energy will come. So
Yeah, and then there's always ways to get money.
Yeah.
Always ways to get money.
There is.
We were going to do bake sales at New World Comics, but then the pandemic hit. True. This is a true thing. We were going to do little dinners and things like that, and we're like,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I was so excited about it, and then
I forgot about
the
that.
pandemic hit.
That's right.
I was like, that sounds so fun.
I wasn't on board, but well, they wanted me. I mean, I was basically their horse and pony show, so I mean, I have to be on, you know, because if you're at a Comic-Con, you're having to spend energy being this personality, being open, and being and
It's exhausting.
at the end of a 3-day convention, you are tired because you are like just, all over the place trying to like tell people about your story. You're giving this elevator pitch of your comic book about 200 times over the course of a 3-day convention. Yeah, you have to, and these are the things that you have to learn if you are trying to sell your creator-owned work to a publisher. You have to know how to speak concisely, how to speak quickly to these people. Because like you never know when a publisher, an editor, an art director might be at a convention, and you don't know that they're an editor or an art director, but they come by and look at your work and like, what's this comic about, And if you spend more than 30 seconds trying to tell them what your story's about, they're going to lose interest quickly. So
Even worse, you spend 5 minutes talking to this guy over here, and meanwhile, the editor walks by, looks at everything, but walks on because you're already engaging with this person.
Yeah.
So like that elevator pitch is no joke.
No
You have
joke.
to be able to like tell them what it's about, and then if they're like, hey, do you want to talk about Daredevil? And you're like, usually yes, but not right now. I'm trying to sell comics. And these people, like, they'll ask like, hey, can I sit at your booth? I just want to sit down. And you're like, no.
I know.
What are you talking about? I spent $300 for this thing. You go spend $300, get your own chair.
He's not wrong.
These people will talk your ear off, and that's lovely, and I'm great. People are excited about it, but you are a business. You're there to sell comics, and you're there to advocate for something somebody might only see once. And so if you get caught up in a conversation that's not about your comic, yeah, you're being nice to the person, and they just want somebody to talk to, and I get that. But all these other people have this opportunity to engage in this thing that you love so much, and they missed it because you weren't available to talk to them. So that is a thing. Being able to tell people, hey, that's cool, but.
And going back to social media, in the downtime when you're not at a convention selling, take advantage of all the opportunities that social media does have, because Twitter is full of opportunities. There are so many doors that are waiting to be opened. Well, sure, but like just one instance, there's a great pitch event that happens on Twitter. The hashtag is KidLitGN for graphic novel. And so, like, I'm interested in writing and illustrating for kid-lit graphic novels, middle grade graphic novels, the 9 to 12-year-old range. And there's a huge movement in that right now. Children's book publishing companies are acquiring those original stories left and right so much, and they're publishing so many of these graphic novels right now. So much so that this hashtag event on Twitter happens like, I think, biannually, where you come up with that elevator pitch, and Twitter's great for that because you have, you only have so many, they've added words, but you have this limited word count to craft a perfect pitch for your story. And so you have to find the most eloquent way, not like I'm speaking, but the most eloquent way to pitch your story, to tell people what your story is about without giving away the plot, but telling people what that story is, what is going to draw them to want to know more, what is going to draw the editors and art directors, which are all over Twitter, more so than any other, they're on Instagram too, but Twitter's where you have the most access to all these professionals. It's unreal, the communication level that you have with them. And so take advantage of that whenever these opportunities show up. And
one note of caution though,
yeah,
on social media is specifically designed to tap into that part of your brain that satisfies you as a storyteller.
sure.
It also draws you into fights and conversations that expend energy, but also puts you into a position to look really, really bad. So you have to be careful. Social media is a powerful, powerful tool, but it can also sap so much of your momentum as a storyteller. So you have to manage it very, very closely.
Yeah, treat it like a business. Everything that we've been talking about is talking about it coming from a business standpoint. So social media, you have to treat like a business.
The mic is always hot.
The mic is always hot. Yeah. You're a business entity. You're a business personality. You are your own marketing firm and putting yourself out as a presence. And
choppy waters.
Sure,
But
sure.
once you do, that is your brand. You are that person that decided that you were gonna weigh in and flame this TV show or whatever politician. That is your brand now. You have to be consistent to that, because that is what people are gonna expect from you.
Yeah.
So you can't just step in and be like, okay, I'm gonna throw this, boom, and then I'm gonna step out and none the wiser. People are like, oh, okay. So this is who you are, and they will either choose to engage with you or not based on that. And if you know your brand and you're like, this is on brand for me, cool. But just know that is something that can and does come back to haunt everybody.
But at the same time, you will also find a community of like-minded people that will support you and will have the same stands that you have. And you probably already know that. But as a business, you know, you have the added bonus of possibly having an audience of purchasers at your back as well.
So the question is this my audience, and does my audience have money to spend on a comic?
Right.
If not, maybe let's tilt over here and let's make this my audience.
Sure, yeah.
It's fun.
Any questions? Yes?
I do. I know you travel to a number of Comic Cons, both in and out of state. How do you gauge the quality of each convention in terms of whether you want to go back to that convention or not?
You want me to start with it?
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so when you're at the convention, you look around, you see how many people are holding things that they bought. That's it. There are a lot of, it's simple and it sounds very sharkish, but it is absolutely true. There is a convention that used to go on in Austin that I loved. I loved it so much, but not as a booth. I loved it because there's a lot of cool kids there. They all are making really cool things, but nobody has money to buy. They're all artists. And it's a fun one to go and network, but if you need to make money at that convention, it is not the convention for you. Zine Fest now, which is weird because they're also all creators. Zine Fests are great for comics because you go there and it's just well, depending on the comic you do, but they're all just, you know, punks and counterculture, but now they got real jobs and they're like, hey, I'm a bartender, so I've got a fistful of cash. What's cool? But yeah, you just go in, you look, you go to these big conventions, like the really massive ones. Yeah, there's a lot of people there, but they're all going to line up to talk to, not Stan Lee anymore, but whoever. And they spent $400 to get this autograph. That's all they have. So they're going to come by and talk your ear off about your comic, but they're never going to buy it because they can't. They already spent all the money.
Yeah, you're going to quickly realize which conventions are the ones that are affordable, ones that will like make you money. You'll figure out the ones that people are going to get autographs and photo ops from celebrities. And while those can do well for you, that's not usually the main reason people are there nowadays. And I don't even know why they call them Comic Cons anymore, because it's not really about comics per se, those
Pop
particular
culture.
pop culture conventions, yes. And there are dedicated Comic Cons, and they're on a smaller scale, but usually you'll find the like-minded audience that shares your love for comics.
Yeah, so you just look at the convention. First thing, look at the booth prices. If the booth prices are reasonable, that's usually a good indication. But you go to a lot of these pop culture conventions, they're like $400 a booth.
Oh, I know.
And that's because people are selling tiny hats and,
Yeah,
clothes and
yeah,
stuff like
yeah.
that. And that's great because that's a high markup and good for those artists that are making that money. But as a comic book artist, that is not your scene. You look at the theme of it. You look, is it a fan convention based on autographs? Is it, I don't know, are you doing like a superhero tell, but it's a Star Trek convention? Well, it's not going to really work out. But if it's in your region, if it's in your state, and you've got that weekend off, and you're like, well, the booth price isn't that much, let's give it a try. Go and sit there and see what happens. And sometimes you'll be really surprised. We went to Lights on Broadway,
I was gonna say that.
and I was like, I don't know, this is a retail thing. I don't know if they're really looking for what we're doing. And we got there and we sold out of almost everything that we had. I was like, well, that's why you show up.
So
you never know.
yeah,
You never know.
the opportunity for us during the holiday season, when all these pop-up shops show up, and the opportunity for us to set up a pop-up shop as a publisher arise, and they're decently affordable, and usually we're a unique we're a unique enough market where we do sell pretty well. And so, yeah. So you start finding other markets where you can put your stuff out where people don't have it. I mean, so sometimes Comic-Cons can work against you because you're kind of competing with all these other creators. So you start looking for all kinds of avenues where you feel like comics could also.
And especially if you're starting a small publishing company, and honestly, if you have the bandwidth to do it, start a small publishing company with your friends and just start pulling out the kind of stuff. As long as you're all telling, in the same vein of stories. Like if one of you wants to do a Tolkien, epic, but we're over here, we want to do a bunch of, numbskull comedy. Those don't need to be in the same publishing company. But
what about a numbskull Tolkien epic?
yeah, that would work. Yeah, but you do eventually need to travel, to get the word out, to be able to get, notice outside of your market. But start in your market, get that firm fan base that is going to go on social media, which has no state boundaries, and advocate for you. Really build that fan base local, then grow out. That's no different than being in a band or anything like that. Whenever you do go out of state, especially if you go to like Zine Fest or things like that, where you just like people are going to come buy money, or they're going to come buy things, they got money. Those are just as much about networking as anything else. And if you have a publishing company, that's the time that you start looking around and be like, this little 17-year-old, just their first booth, but they got chops, and I bet their page rate is okay by me. So you can really find places to find like-minded, or even just like going like, hey, you guys are cool, we're cool. What around here should we be paying attention to? And sometimes you find about really great conventions or shops just by talking to creators that live there. So there is value, but you're probably going to operate at a loss for those conventions.
And I will say that that you can create opportunities like he was talking about. Literati Press also owns a bookshop that is located in the Paseo Arts District, and they started a really unique gallery show called Comics as Art.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a curated show where anyone can submit a cover and 5 pages of their own story, and if you're chosen, you can win a prize as top prize. But at the very least, if you're chosen, you can have your work framed and hung as a gallery show, and with the opportunity of also being a part of an anthology that they print. So
yeah, right now we have 3 comics that started as Comics as Art.
That's right.
Things that they're ongoing that should be releasing the next year to 2 years. So yeah, Comics as Art. We should have started with that. But yeah, so it's we open submissions in early spring, maybe late. I think February is actually when we do it. But the deadline's July. The show's in September. And even if you don't get chosen, just finishing it has value. And we will look at it. If you want feedback, we'll give you a little feedback. But just finishing things, because it's going to take you, like it would take you 100 songs to get 1 good song. It's going to take you 100 comics to get 1 good comic. And those ratios start going the other way with practice. But
absolutely,
it takes a lot thrown at the wall.
It does, absolutely.
Any other questions? This would be so much easier if somebody asked a question.
Every time I think of a question, you guys answer before I can say it, so.
Oh, so we're just thorough. You are welcome then.
Or they're bored.
Well, if you guys have no further questions, I hope that's a good jumping off point for you guys. And feel free to reach out to us on social media. I respond to comments and to direct messages on Instagram, especially. For me, Instagram is artist Jerry Bennett, and then with Charles, it's
everything's Literati Press.
Literati Press.
At Literati Press.
At Literati Press.
Yeah, our web URL is literatipressok.com.
Yes.
Because some jerk already got Literati Press.
But we will be here afterwards also. We are indeed selling our comics, and so we have our creator-owned Glamorella's daughter, plus all the other titles that we've released in the past year, or he's released in the past year. So
We've released.
well, we've released.
Council.
I guess I'm part of that council. Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much.
Okay, cool.
that's
you.
wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Yeah, I did, I kept thinking of questions and you guys were just answering. them.
Really?
We talk
It's
about
like
this a lot.
machine gun.